Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the SG Partners webinar on improving the sales recruitment process. Bigger pool, filter faster, sell quicker. I'd like to welcome all those around the country. We have people here from New Zealand, Victoria, Queensland, New South Wales and Perth. Much appreciated for you being involved in this. Today we're going to share what SG Partners have been doing the best of practice for 10 years, where companies, our clients, ask us to either improve their recruitment process or recruit on their behalf. So today I have Matthew Pearce with me, and he's going to be facilitating most of this webinar, going through some slides and giving you some content. One of the challenges we have when recruiting salespeople, and I say we, not us, our clients, is having the right expectations and then following through with those expectations in a very measured, focused format, and we'll be sharing you some of the tips and tricks that we use throughout that process. Just last week I was with a potential client who had failed in their first experiment, and they were aware enough to ensure that they weren't going to fail again, and so they've asked for our assistance. But how many of you out there fail? So the information we're going to share with you today is going to help you change your current paradigm to get even better results. So without further ado, Matt, take it away.
Thank you, Michael. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what makes a great sales candidate. It's interesting when we talk with companies and talk with businesses all the time, there seems to be 4 or 5 recurring themes appear, which are they've got previous experience in our industry, they've got previous experience engaging with our clients, they've got proven success in delivering sales, and they've got the ability to quickly ramp up and build a pipeline, or they'll be able to build great relationships with our clients. Okay, let's move on to, before we start, let's talk a bit of a case study. It was actually one of the first roles that I completed here. It was the first time I engaged with the process that SG Partners has been using for the last 10 years. And it was a situation where we had advertised and actually got a huge pool. It was for a sales manager down in New South Wales. 280 candidates applied. We were then able to filter faster, so we're able to cut those candidates down to a manageable number. We identified the 2 strongest candidates from there, and the client then selected the one that they liked and felt would work best with their business. The great part was that took a total of 4 weeks. So in 4 weeks, we went from 280 candidates down to 1. Today, we're going to talk you through the strategies we utilise to be able to do that successfully. So let's move on. Talk about the bigger pool. And the key with the bigger pool is the job ad. Now we've talked about sales manager here with the slide, but this relates just as well for a sales professional. And the question we're going to ask is, what's the intent of the job ad? Now most people, when they think about a job ad, is let's talk about the role. But what is the candidate most interested in hearing about? What is on offer for them? Now, what's the intent of that? And what do you need to know? That's the question. That they fit your critical criteria. If those 2 things align, then you're actually looking at someone you need to speak with. So the question is, how are you inspiring them to apply? Let's look at some ads. Now this is one I've just plucked down off Seek the other day. It represents, I think, the universal format and thinking around writing an ad for a job. It talks about the company, it talks about the role, it talks about the requirements. If you actually look at it, what is there from an offer to the candidate? The reality is it's the salary. And hey, if you want to work for a big company, it might be of interest as well. It does not talk directly to the candidate. So let's flip that around and look at one that we've put together and the style we use regularly. So, this ad here, as you can see, is quite simple. First thing it addresses is what the opportunity or what's on offer for the candidate. The 4 or 5 key things that's going to be of interest to them. The second part is, what are the 4 or 5 key things that we're looking for? If those 2 match, again, we've got a good candidate. So last thing is a strong call to action to apply. Very simple, very clean, gets the message across quickly.
Because ultimately, in our experiences, candidates won't read everything that you put in a job ad, right? So it's about making sure you're focused on what they're focused on.
Yeah, and their focus is, when they're looking to move, is because they're not happy with the salary remuneration, but that's normally not the key one. They're not happy with management or the direction of the company. They feel as though they're being stifled, or they're not getting those growth opportunities within their career. So they're the three things that people look for. So if you talk to those, you're then talking to the candidate and what they're going to be wanting to do.
Excellent.
So what you end up with? We end up with a bigger pool. We've got 280 candidates. Now, traditionally in recruitment, this is where the pain begins. It's the point where you've got 280 resumes to go through.
And look, as a business owner, I don't particularly enjoy going through 280 CVs, so I'm going to pass it on to someone else.
Yes, and normally it's someone such as myself that gets the lucky job. So how do you cut that down? Because let's face it, they're going to blur after the 20 or 30. You've also then got because you're having to move through them so quickly, you've actually got the beliefs and the preconceptions of the person or the individual looking at them.
That's right. Everyone's got their own filters.
Yes.
And you mentioned quickly, because the best candidate in there is the best candidate for a particular reason, and they might be also talking to other companies at the same time.
Agreed. So it's about looking how you can move faster through that process and identify the people. So let's talk about that. And the first thing we need to do with Filter Faster is actually get our pool down to a manageable level.
Mm-hmm.
So, Michael, I'll get you to talk through how we can go about that, and the most important question that needs to be answered.
So, normally when a potential client asks us to recruit for them, one of the first things we ask them is, what's their criteria of selection? And usually they say, look, can they sell? And I said, yes, it's not only can they sell the way you want them to sell really effectively. So what we've been using over the last 10 years, and it's changed accordingly to how sales has changed, is we assess every candidate with a sales capability assessment. And what I love about this assessment is it's focused on a number of areas. The first is the will to sell. It's so important that the sales candidate actually has the comfortability in the identity of a salesperson. That's their desire. Their desire to wake up every morning and want to sell, as opposed to wake up every morning, take the keys to your car, take the salary, and pretend to sell. And then it's commitment. So doing what you need to do to push through the barriers to get the sales through the end. The other important thing we look at is what's going on in their head they're probably not even aware of. So the DNA, so the limiting beliefs or the beliefs that are strengths. So in particular, we look at the need for approval, what some of are they comfortable talking about money in the first meeting? Do they handle rejection? Do they recover from rejection? And many other things. These are the building blocks for salespeople to take on new content. If any of these building blocks are our weakness, new content as far as sales skills will bounce off because it's incongruent to their belief system. And then next we also look at their selling skill sets. So these are competencies they've built up over time. Are they a hunter or a farmer? Do they consultative sell, or they are a transactional seller? Do they actually know how to sell value? Do they ask questions and qualify opportunities? Do they follow a sales process? Do they live and breathe CRM? Do they use LinkedIn or Twitter? These are all skill sets that great salespeople have built up and used time and time again. And then we also look at is, are they coachable or are they trainable? And how quickly, like a figure it out factor, how quickly will they learn about your sales process, your sales methodology, your expectations of how they're going to sell into your market? So these are all things that we look at. Every candidate that applies needs to do this assessment. Those that don't do the assessment, well, they don't want the role. Ultimately, we weed out 85% of candidates just by doing this sales assessment, which makes it a bit more challenging, but geez, it makes it a lot easier when you've got 280 applicants.
So the outcome, that 280, we've used this sales assessment as the filter. So we now know that everybody we're looking at has the capability and knowledge and commitment to be a salesperson. And we've got 42. That's more manageable.
So I don't have to look at 280 CVs.
No,
Right.
42. So now it's time to actually dive in and look at the resumes.
But only the resumes of those that came recommended or worthy of recommended through the assessment.
Correct. So when you start looking at a resume, the key thing here is now you've actually got salespeople you know that can sell. So the first thing to do is most people take a very strict view of the resume, and going back to those earlier things, they're looking at industry or clients or those type of things and having direct knowledge of, or it almost worked for a competitor, that's the sign of success. When we're talking about looking at resumes, the key is to firstly rule people in then out. It's about actually saying, is there possibly something there that could connect the dots?
Like transferable skills or experiences from other roles.
Exactly. And that's when you ask the questions, what are the problems that are being solved? What are the problems they're solving for clients? Because the conversations they're having to identify those problems, and then from that, who are they going to be dealing with, who makes the decisions, are going to have a direct impact on the type of person you're looking for. It
like for like, right?
Exactly, but it broadens the skill set, because if they've solved similar problems in a different industry but dealt with similar type of clients in the communication, that skill set could be transferable. The next is to say, what is the candidate trying to say to you, and what they're trying not to tell you. Now, this is when you're reading the resume. There's a lot that could be gleaned from that when you go into the detail. An example I'll give is of a candidate that I was looking at, and I thought, when they talked in their resume, it was very much about penetrating new markets, great go-to-market strategy, building the pipeline, building the contacts. When we looked at the sales profile, it reflected the fact that they were a strong hunter. But what they weren't saying was what happened with that pipeline. And it's 2 or 3 roles in a row where they'd gone in and built this fantastic pipeline and built this business up. And then when you started to look at the language, they were telling us that we're great at that part, but they didn't know the sales process. So what then happened was they moved on to the next role because they couldn't close things out. And using the rule in then rule out approach, actually dug into this, and we've very quickly identified that this was the particular case, and the person wasn't going to be suitable for the role we were looking for.
But the assessment gave us an indication of where to dig.
Yes.
So the reason why they were in the pool, because we believe they had the understanding. Through the interview, we then clarified what the understanding was and what they actually put in practice.
Exactly.
Great.
So, and what you then end up with is, on average, about 25% of those will actually come through. So you're then down to 10 resumes of people that you're looking to engage with, or have identified to engage with. So let's talk about that phone interview. Now, the first question we ask people is when you first engage with a candidate, what do you do? What is the key area you focus on?
Well, that's right. It's, what are you trying to glean in that 5-minute or 10-minute conversation?
So, and I'm amazed how many people will actually say, I'll just get a quick overview of their resume or their background.
But they've got the resume already. Why would they need to do that? In that phone interview, yeah.
Yes, it's an interesting question, isn't it? So the question is, what do you really need to know? And you've got the answer there. It's your key criteria. You've already identified the 4 or 5 key things that are relevant for yourself to actually then consider this individual for the role.
Because you actually put it on the job ad, right? Yep.
So rather than trying to go through everything to identify where that experience sits, ask them. Now, say, of the 5 key things, I just want to understand where your experience sits. Get them to tell you. Understand why they are looking and what they're looking for. If they can fit your key criteria close enough, you understand why they're looking and what they're looking for, you've got a good match. And why I say the why they're looking and what they're looking for, it's experience we had a while ago was a gentleman applied, fantastic candidate, strong sales management reporting, but his background for the last 4 or 5 years had been a general manager, and he'd been made redundant. when I actually asked him and talked with him, I said, well, look, what are you actually looking for? Because my concern was this is a sales management role that had no capability to grow into general management. The senior structure was there. And he goes, oh, look, he couldn't decide, but when I said, if you got offered a general manager's role or a sales manager, which would you choose? He said, the general managers. So it became clear that in this particular circumstance, he was just looking for a job. And that's a concern, because if it doesn't offer the growth and doesn't offer the direction he's looking for, if something else came along, he'd be shifting and they'd be back in the same situation. So that's why it's critical to actually understand that part of this process, because it's about marrying those values and the opportunity up very early on. The outcome? We've taken that 10 and we've got 4 to 5 that we've identified through the phone interview that are worth actually sitting down and having a face-to-face conversation and really drilling down on. So we then talk about the interview process. Few key things about the interview process. Firstly, move fast. Great candidates are going to be looking at multiple opportunities. Great candidates are actually weighing up not just the opportunity from a job side of view, but the way the actual company and the culture and things work. If it's decision by consensus or a slow decision-making process, it's going to reflect in a way that they go, do I really want to actually working in something that's so bureaucratically top-heavy? May not be the case, but you have yourself ready to move. Think about who you need involved and why. So many companies, again, going back to that decision by consensus, want the input because of the culture and the value system they've got of multiple people in the actual interview process. But how many people are actually going to be involved with the decision-making process? And how many people are more involved is to make sure that there's that intangible fit, that they're going to be comfortable working together. If that's the case, bring the people involved with decision-making and let them be involved with the formal interview process. The intangibles as such, the people they'll be working with, bring them in at the end. Make it more informal. Allow them to have that conversation and get that comfort level and ask some of those questions they may not want to ask in a formal interview.
Or invite them for a morning tea or an afternoon tea at another day.
Exactly, come and meet the team. And focus on the right things. Their ability, their experiences, and the culture and values. Yeah. Interestingly, I didn't say again, I'll go back to the resume. I didn't talk about the resume there. Because the resume is something where you've identified where you've got them to tell you where their experiences are and where they fit. You really drill down on their ability and then talk to questions about the cultures and values. The resume is a final check of accountability. It's your chance to go back and actually make sure everything they tell you verbally is congruent with what they've written. You want a salesperson that's going to be accountable. So this is your chance to hold them accountable to it. And also identify at that last moment if there's any behaviours that are carrying through from the repetitive nature of their job movements. And the final thing is to treat it like an initial sales meeting. Sounds crazy, but when you first go out and do a discovery meeting with a client, the rule of thumb is 20% of the time you talk, ask good questions, and 80% of the time you then listen to uncover the problems and understand the person, understand their values, so you can then actually be engaging with them moving forward.
Rather than selling the job.
Exactly.
Yeah. How many times have we got candidates that come out of interviews and said it was a great interview, the interviewer talked the most?
Yes. Yeah. So you want to understand the individual, and that's the key part of the interview process, because you've got them down to the point that once that happens, you're then actually picking based on the culture and the values, and based on those key underlying things with parts of the business which are going to lead to success. And you've got yourself down to a selection of 2 or 3 candidates. You select your successful one. They can sell, manage sales teams well. It's what they want to do. They can do so effectively. They're going to engage with your clients how you want them to, and critically, they're going to fit your company's cultures and values. Do we have any questions?
So while we're waiting for the questions, if anything that we've shared with you resonates with you, any part of that recruitment process, here's a couple of links that you can go to. Be assured that we'll be reaching out to every one of you to see what's interesting to you and what things that you would like to change along the way. So do we have any questions?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do, Michael. What if the candidate doesn't complete the sales assessment?
I would say they're not interested in the role then. There is a caveat on that though, right? Sometimes the email goes into spam or junk, so we do follow up. And if you've got a small candidate pool, then do a quick dive of the resumes, and if there's someone in particular you're really keen on, then follow up to get them to do the assessment. Now, we have had in the past that some people say, I don't want to do the assessment because they think they're going to be judged on it. It's about how we pre-frame it is we want to see what you could be even better at, where your growth is. So it's about how you pre-frame that.
Another question, can you provide any further statistics when using the sales assessment?
Certainly, Matt.
Yes, well, the study which has been completed, and again, the OMG group, which is where the assessment comes from, are now up to about 1.9 million sales professionals and sales managers have actually completed it. What they've found is that 92% of the people who are recommended and are still recruited and go through a rigorous recruitment process end up in the top 50% of salespeople for an organisation within the first 12 months. Conversely, 64% who are not recommended and are hired are either being performance managed, have left, or being replaced within the first 6 months.
So that's through OMG's predictive validity testing, where they went out to companies that were using the screening and they said, where are the people that we recommend or were worthy of recommending to interview? Where are they over the 12 months that you've been using this? And where are the people that we said not to recommend to interview? Where are they? So that's where that data comes from. Any other questions?
Yeah, one final question actually. What if the role is a niche market or industry and you can only generate a small pool of candidates initially?
That's actually a really good question. I find it interesting because one of the conversations we have regularly, and it's one I've actually just had with a client, is around the fact of, but what do you really need? If your pool is too small, it probably suggests that you're actually looking in a very restricted way. You know, part of this process is you can open the pool up because you're looking for those transferable skills. So if the pool's small, really it's taking that step back and actually thinking about what is it we really need, how can we broaden the pool by shaping the language and shaping the requirements to do so, and then you can then drill down once you've got the pool broadened to look at people and have that left field look, I think would probably be a good way to say it, around that transferability of skills in the fact of what we talked about. What's the problems they're solving? Who are they solving the problems with? So who's making the decisions? And what is the actual sales process that the organisation utilises, and how have they actually performed a similar one in the past? You meet those three things, your pool's broader, but you can bring it down to still find the right person.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We sincerely hope that the information we've shared with you will improve how you recruit salespeople. But of course, if there's any other questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you.